A 25-year-old struggles against social prejudice to live authentically, feels lost but is encouraged not to give up hope. I came out to my mom in the parking lot of a Walmart right between a shopping cart return and a sign for discounted rotisserie chickens. Her silence was louder than any scream. She didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even flinch. She just put the keys back in her purse and said, "Well, the Lord doesn't make mistakes, but maybe you're confused." Then she drove me home like nothing happened. I was 25, too old to still be scared of disappointing your parents, right? But something about the way she looked through me that day, not at me, not to me, but through me, made me feel like I'd been erased. My name's Riley. I use they/them pronouns, and I live in Greenville, South Carolina, where queer is still whispered behind hands and LGBTQIA+ people are referred to with sighs and side eyes at church potlucks. I work as a barista at a local cafe downtown. Every morning I pull espresso shots for people who either ignore me completely or smile too wide, trying too hard not to flinch when I say, "I'm non-binary." Sometimes I wonder if I'm just making things harder for myself. If I just put on a dress or grow out my beard, maybe the world would relax around me. But then I remember how I used to look in the mirror at 16, 20, even 24, and never recognize the person staring back. Like I was borrowing someone else's body and couldn't find the receipt to return it. I came out late, not to myself, but to others. I'd always known. But I waited until my college loans kicked in and my bones had grown too tired from carrying the lie. There was no dramatic aha moment, just a quiet suffocation that I finally couldn't bear. Still, I wasn't ready for how lonely it would feel. You think the hardest part is saying the words out loud. But no, the hardest part is the silence that follows. I lost friends I'd known since middle school. My old church group leader blocked me on Facebook the day I changed my profile picture to a trans pride filter. And my uncle, the one who used to sneak me candy during sermons, pulled me aside last Thanksgiving and said, "You know you're going to hell, right? Right there next to the gravy boat. But the thing is, I didn't come here to tell you how sad it is, or how cruel people can be. You already know that. What I want to tell you is what happened the night I almost gave up. It was late October, the kind of night where the wind sounds like it's trying to speak. I'd just gotten off work after a double shift. My manager, Brianna, had asked me to cover for Kevin again. Kevin, who always got away with showing up late because he was tall and straight and charming. I was still wearing my apron when I wandered into the park across from my apartment. I sat on the swings like I used to when I was a kid, and I cried. Not the pretty, poetic kind of crying. I mean ugly, chest-heaving, snot-dripping crying. I kept whispering, "I don't belong here," like some broken mantra. I don't belong in this town. I don't belong in this body. I don't belong in this world. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. "Hey!" a voice said, low, cautious. I turned, startled, wiping my face like it would erase the pain. It was a guy around my age. Light brown skin, high cheekbones, dark curls tucked under a beanie. He looked like someone from an indie film, like he smelled of leather journals and expensive cologne. "You okay?" he asked genuinely. I almost told him to leave me alone, but something in his voice made me pause. It wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was something else. Like he knew the sound of that kind of crying. "I'm just tired," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've been there." I don't know why I told him everything. Maybe because it was dark and I didn't expect to see him again. Maybe because I had nothing left to lose. I told him about the parking lot coming out, about my mom's quiet dismissal, about how I couldn't afford therapy and didn't trust the local support groups because the last one had a pastor sneak in to save souls. He listened, like really listened. His name was Andre. He was a community organizer from Atlanta visiting his cousin for the weekend. "I know what it's like," he said, "being too much and not enough at the same time." We ended up walking around the park until midnight, talking about books, about music, about the ways we learned to make ourselves smaller to survive. At one point, he said, "You don't have to carry their shame." And I broke again. Not from pain this time, but from the shock of someone seeing me as whole. We exchanged numbers. I didn't expect anything. A lot of people say the right things and disappear. But Andre didn't. He texted the next morning. And the next. And the next. 2 weeks later, he drove 2 hours just to meet me for coffee on my day off. I wore my favorite denim vest with the non-binary patch stitched into the side. I was nervous, scared even. But when he walked into the cafe and smiled, I felt something settle in my chest. Not butterflies, not nerves, just quiet, like my soul exhaled. We started seeing each other more. Slowly, I learned how to laugh again. Not just the polite kind, but real, belly-deep laughter. I learned how to take up space, to hold his hand in public even when people stared, to wear what felt right, not what felt safe. But the world doesn't change just because your heart does. One night, we went to a bar downtown. I picked it my mistake. It wasn't a queer space, just a regular bar with regular people and regular bigotry. We were dancing, just having fun, when some guy brushed past us and muttered, "Freaks!" I froze. But Andre turned to him calmly and said, "We're not here for your approval. We're here for each other." The guy laughed, but walked away. That night, back at his cousin's place, I asked Andre, "How do you do it? How do you stay so brave?" He kissed my forehead and said, "I'm not brave. I'm tired too. But if I give up, then they win. And I refuse to let them write the story of who I am." Those words stitched themselves into my heart. I started volunteering with him on weekends, helping teens like me find affirming spaces. I met other non-binary folks, trans folks, people who carried names they chose and love they fought for. I saw a girl barely 17 come out at one of our meetups and say, "I thought I was broken, but now I know I'm just becoming." That's when it hit me. I wasn't alone anymore, and maybe I never had been. There was this one Saturday early December. It had rained all night, and the sidewalks were slick with reflections of holiday lights. I was standing in front of the rec center, waiting for Andre to arrive so we could set up for a youth support circle. I had brought a stack of handmade zines with poetry and affirmations I'd written, silly things. Really, but words I needed to hear when I was younger. A teen came up to me, no more than 15. Pale skin, oversized hoodie, hands stuffed deep into the pockets. They didn't say anything at first, just hovered near the door, shivering. "You looking for the group?" I asked gently. They nodded. Then, after a long pause, they whispered, "My parents think I'm at chess club." I smiled, not to minimize their fear, but to show them I understood. "Well, lucky for you, we're way cooler than chess club." Their smile was so small I almost missed it. But it was there. A flicker of hope. That was the day I realized something important. I didn't need to be whole to help others heal. I just had to show up. Again and again. And I did. But the more I lived authentically, the more visible I became. And the more visible I became, the more I attracted attention, not all of it good. One afternoon, just as we wrapped up a volunteer event at the local library, I stepped outside and found the tires on my bike slashed. A note was tucked under the seat. For words, scratched in angry red marker. "You don't belong here." It was a small act, petty even, but it rattled something in me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing those words echo in my head. "You don't belong here. You don't belong here." Andre held me while I cried. Again. And I hated how many times he'd had to see me break. "I feel like all I do is fall apart," I said. He looked at me then, eyes dark and soft, and whispered, "Maybe that's what becoming is, falling apart enough times to find what's real underneath." I didn't answer, couldn't, but something about those words clung to me. Still, fear crept back into my skin. I stopped biking to work. I wore more neutral clothing. I even started saying, "I go by Riley" instead of "I'm non-binary," when people asked, just to make things easier, just to shrink a little smaller again. And one night, in the silence of my apartment, I whispered, "Am I giving up?" No answer came, just the hum of the heater. But the question stayed with me like a splinter under my ribs. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my mom. We hadn't spoken since the Walmart parking lot. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Hey," she said, voice tight. A pause. "I heard you're doing talks now?" With, kids? Yes, I said cautiously. LGBTQ plus youth. Another pause. Then, your Aunt Patty saw you on the local news. Said you looked different. I braced myself. But I saw it too. And I don't know. You looked happy. The silence between us felt like glass. Sharp. Breakable. I'm trying, I finally said. She exhaled a shaky breath. I'm not saying I understand. But I miss you. That was it.
No επάλεγει.
No grand gesture. But it was a crack in the wall. And sometimes that's how it starts, with a single crack. We met for coffee a week later. She didn't call me Riley, but she didn't call me anything else either. Just asked questions. Listened. Sometimes winced. Sometimes blinked back tears. But she stayed. And that meant more than she'll ever know. And then January came. I was asked to speak on a panel at a nearby college. Nothing huge. Just a local event on identity, mental health, and resilience. Andre came with me, held my hand backstage. I was terrified. But when I stepped up to the mic, something shifted. I looked out over the crowd, a sea of faces, curious and unsure. And I said, I used to believe I had to choose between being loved and being myself. But the truth is, the love that requires you to disappear is not love at all. A hush fell over the room. I told them about the Walmart parking lot, about the slashed tires, about crying on a swing set at midnight. But I also told them about the kid in the hoodie, the one who chose to show up despite their fear. I told them about Andre, about laughing again, about the quiet bravery of simply being. When I finished, there was silence. Then slowly, applause. And then a standing ovation. I'd never felt anything like it. Afterward, a girl came up to me. Pink hair. Acne scars. She looked like she wanted to speak, but didn't have the words. Thank you, she finally said. I thought I was the only one. You're never the only one, I told her. She cried. I cried. We hugged. The world spun on. Over the next few months, things changed. I started a podcast, In Between Spaces, where I interviewed queer folks from small towns across America. Stories of survival, of joy, of finding light in the cracks. The first few episodes barely got 100 listens. But then something shifted. Someone big retweeted an episode. Suddenly, I was getting messages from kids in Iowa, moms in Arkansas, even a retired veteran in Montana who said, "You made me see my granddaughter in a new light." Andre smiled every time I told him about a new message. You're planting seeds, he said, even if you don't always get to see what grows. But I did. Sometimes. One day, the kid in the hoodie, their name was Sam, stood up at a youth circle and said, I used to hate myself, but now I don't. Just that. But it hit harder than any speech I'd ever given. We took a group photo that day. All of us smiling, mismatched, defiant. And when I looked at it later, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time myself. Not as a mistake, not as a burden, but as someone who belonged. Then spring rolled around. I got a letter in the mail, a real one, from a teacher I'd had in high school, Mr. Wells, my 10th grade English teacher. The one who used to give me extra credit for writing poetry. He wrote, I always knew you were different, but I didn't know you were this brave. Thank you for becoming the person you were meant to be. I'm proud of you. I wept, because sometimes the healing comes years later, from unexpected corners, from people who watched in silence and now speak. And still, the world isn't perfect. People still stare, still whisper, still send hate DMs. But now I know something they don't. I am not a phase, not confusion, not a punchline. I am Riley. I am real. I am here. And I am loved. Final note. If you're reading this, and you feel like the world doesn't see you, like the mirror lies and your voice disappears when it reaches the air, I want you to know this. You matter. Even if your parents don't understand. Even if your town feels like a trap. Even if the world calls you wrong. You are not wrong for existing. You are becoming. Keep going. We need you. I need you. You are not alone. And you never were. If you find it interesting, please subscribe to follow the next stories.